Let me show you something Claude wrote yesterday, and I want you to spot the problem. So what's wrong with that sentence? Nothing grammatically. The ideas connect. The meaning is clear. But read it again and you'll notice something. There are 3 of those long horizontal dashes in a single sentence. 3 M dashes in 25 words. A colleague read that and said, "Did AI write this?" It didn't. I wrote it. Every word. But I had spent so much time working with AI tools that somewhere along the way I had absorbed the habit. I was writing like a chatbot without realizing it. And the worst part? I didn't even notice until someone pointed it out. That was the moment I started actually paying attention to this question. Why does AI use M dashes so obsessively? And the deeper I went, the more I realized that basically every popular explanation I'd heard was either incomplete or just flat out wrong. So in this video, I want to walk you through the real story, where this habit actually comes from, why it's almost impossible to train out, and what it means for everyone who uses AI to write, including those of us who've accidentally started writing like one. But before we get into the why, let me give you a sense of the scale. Because AI uses a lot of M dashes is one of those things that everyone says and almost nobody has actually measured. Someone did measure it, and the results are strange. The modern human baseline for M dash usage sits at around 0.25 to 0.275% of all words in general English writing. That's what regular people actually produce when they write. Someone pulled the full text of Moby-Dick, Herman Melville's 216,000 word 19th century novel, and ran it through the same counter. Moby-Dick contains 1,712 M dashes. That's 0.79% of every word Melville wrote. 3 times the modern human rate, which tells you something useful. The 1800s were a completely different punctuation universe. Then they tested the actual AI models. And this is where I expected a clean story. AI uses more M dashes than humans, the end. But the results scattered across the entire range in a way that immediately complicated things. GPT-4o, the model whose name has basically become synonymous with M-abuse in online discussions, actually landed below the human baseline in this test. Gemini sat roughly in the middle, about twice the human rate. Reasonable, even. And then there's Claude. Claude Opus uses M dashes at nearly 12 per 1,000 words. That's half again as often as Moby-Dick. 4.5 times the modern human rate. If you're looking for a single model to blame for the AI loves M dashes reputation, based on the data, it's not the one the meme is named after. Reading that number stopped me for a second, because I use Claude constantly. For writing, for editing, for thinking through ideas. And somewhere in all those interactions, I had been marinating in M dash heavy output for months. No wonder my own writing started drifting toward it. The scatter across models is actually the most important finding here. If the M dash habit were simply baked in by a shared training corpus, every model trained on roughly the same data should cluster at similar rates. They don't. Something beyond the training data is pulling these numbers in very different directions for each model. That clue matters a lot for understanding what's actually going on. The most common explanation I had absorbed and repeated to people, I'm somewhat embarrassed to admit, is that AI overuses M dashes because they're efficient. 1 token instead of 3, 4. And the model is optimizing for brevity. Makes perfect sense. Clean, tidy, logical. Except someone actually tested it with a tokenizer. And the math doesn't hold up the way the theory needs it to. Here's what the tokenizer actually shows. A bare M dash, 1 token, and 3 tokens. So yes, technically the M dash is more efficient. Theory confirmed, right? Not quite. That comparison is rigged because it's comparing the M dash against the most verbose phrasing it could possibly replace. Drop both options into real sentences with surrounding words and spaces, and the edge collapses almost completely. 1 token. The M dash saves you 1 token over the wordy version. And against a simple comma, 0 tokens saved. The M dash and the comma are identical in token count once you include the surrounding spaces. A 1 token at best advantage, only against the clumsiest alternative, cannot explain a 10x usage jump between GPT 3.5 and GPT 4o. If token efficiency were genuinely steering these models, they'd be ruthless about commas everywhere, cutting every word they could, not just dashes. They're not. The efficiency theory isn't completely wrong. It's part of why the habit sticks once it exists. A model gets a tiny reward for slightly more efficient output. Over billions of training steps, tiny advantages compound. But it's not where the habit comes from in the first place. I spent a while believing the token efficiency explanation. It sounds compelling. It has the right shape of a technical insight. but it doesn't survive contact with actual tokenizer data, and I should have checked earlier. There are a few other popular theories that get repeated constantly. Most of them fall apart under scrutiny too. M dashes are just common in English, so the model is mirroring its training data. This one doesn't work for the most obvious reason. If AI used M dashes at the same rate as humans, nobody would notice. The entire reason this is a thing people talk about is that models use them at dramatically higher rates than people do. Mirroring the training data would produce the human baseline. It doesn't. It's the RLHF workers in Kenya and Nigeria. This is a fascinating theory, and I understand why people find it compelling. The final stage of AI training uses human raters to evaluate outputs, and major labs have outsourced a significant amount of this work to African countries. The same theory, applied to words like delve and tapestry and explore, actually does hold up. Those words are more common in African English varieties. But M dashes? Someone pulled Nigerian English text data sets and measured. M dashes showed up at 0.022% of words, less than the global English baseline. The theory falls apart when you check the actual data. African English doesn't explain the M dash. Medium auto-converts hyphens to M dashes, and Medium was major training data. This one explains the wrong thing. The question isn't why models use the M dash character instead of a hyphen. The question is why models use M dashes as parenthetical breaks and punchy clause connectors far more often than humans do. Auto-converted hyphens in compound words like double-crossed would teach a model to use M dashes as hyphens. That's not what's happening. The behavior doesn't match the theory. Each of these theories has the shape of a good explanation. None of them actually fit the evidence when you look closely. So if it's not token efficiency, not training data mirroring, not RLHF demographics, not medium, what is it? Here's the theory that actually fits the timeline and the evidence. GPT 3.5, launched in late 2022, didn't overuse M dashes. GPT 4.0, released in 2024, used roughly 10 times more. Anthropic's Claude, Google's Gemini, and even open-source Chinese models all developed the same habit around the same period. Something changed between November 2022 and mid-2024 that affected essentially every major model at once. That something appears to be a shift in training data, specifically a massive expansion into physical print books. In 2022, AI labs were primarily training on public internet content and whatever digitized books were available, which skewed heavily toward modern bestsellers, because that's what people download. But once the capabilities of these models became obvious, labs raced to find higher quality training text. And higher quality, in practice, meant older books. Older books have two major advantages. More of them are in the public domain, and more of them have been digitized for academic and archival purposes. So when labs went looking for better training data, they went further back in time. Court filings show Anthropic began this process in early 2024. OpenAI almost certainly did the same. And here's the punctuation history fact that ties it all together. M-usage in English peaked around 1860. That's when it was most common, about 30% more prevalent than even today's already elevated usage. The further back you go in the literary canon, the more M dashes per page you find. Moby-Dick, 1,712 M dashes. A 19th century novel saturated with them. The print book theory says, models learned to write from sources that were absolutely loaded with M dashes. The habit got baked in during pre-training, and it's so hard to train out because it's not a surface-level quirk. It's woven into the model's fundamental sense of what polished, authoritative prose sounds like. This is the explanation that fits the timing, fits the data, and fits the behavior. The scatter across models makes sense too. Each lab's post-training choices, their specific RLHF preferences, and reward model design pull the habit in different directions from the same starting point. Understanding where the habit came from is one thing. Understanding why it's reinforcing and compounding is another, and this part is uncomfortable to sit with. Several forces are now keeping the M dash habit alive and making it stronger over time. First, M dashes feel polished. LLMs are tuned during RLHF to sound authoritative and refined. M dashes have always been associated with carefully edited prose, magazines, literary fiction, quality journalism. Human raters during training consistently reward outputs that feel clear and well-structured. M-heavy prose reads as carefully edited, so it gets rewarded, so models produce more of it, so raters reward it again. Second, models can't self-edit. A human writer drafting an article will notice at revision time that they've used 5 M dashes in 2 paragraphs and dial it back. Models generate in a single pass with no global perspective on what they've already done. They optimize locally. Once a pattern is in the weights, it just keeps coming, with no revision stage to catch the accumulation. Third, the feedback loop is now eating itself. Newer models are training partly on outputs from older models, either through deliberate synthetic data or by vacuuming up AI-generated content that's spread across the internet. As more of the web fills with M-heavy AI text, the next generation of models inherits the habit more strongly. This is the early shape of what researchers call model collapse, where new models amplify the quirks of their predecessors. And fourth, this is the one that got me. Humans are catching the habit too. A study tracking M dashes in scientific abstracts found that human writers more than doubled their M dash usage between 2021 and 2025. We're not just noticing AI's dash obsession, we're absorbing it, which is exactly what happened to me. I wasn't trying to write like AI. I just spent enough time reading AI output that my own sense of what polished prose looked like shifted, invisibly, gradually, until someone read my writing and asked if a chatbot had written it. Now people have started using M dashes as a signal to detect AI writing. Too many M dashes? Probably AI. Some platforms and editors now flag M-heavy text as suspicious. But M dashes are not a new invention. Emily Dickinson used them constantly. She practically built her poetic style around them. Journalists at The New Yorker have used them for decades. They're a legitimate, useful, long-established piece of punctuation that predates AI by centuries. So what we've actually done is declare that a punctuation mark associated with quality writing is now suspicious, because AI learned to write from quality writing. Some human writers are now avoiding M dashes entirely to avoid being mistaken for bots. Giving up a punctuation mark they might genuinely love that suits their style because chatbots adopted it. Others are refusing. Continuing to use M dashes as Dickinson and Melville did, trusting that the rest of their writing will carry the human signal. Meanwhile, there's this moment I can't stop thinking about. Sam Altman announced on X in late 2025 that ChatGPT would finally respect custom instructions to avoid M dashes. Screenshots circulated almost immediately of ChatGPT apologizing for using an M dash in the very same sentence where it promised not to. The model literally couldn't stop itself while describing its intention to stop. That is the most honest summary of how deep this goes. So, should you stop using M dashes? Honestly, and I'm going to use one here because I've earned it. That's entirely your call. You could hand this punctuation mark over to the bots and move on, or you could refuse. Keep using M dashes as writers have for 200 years, because your specific point of view, your lived experience, your willingness to be wrong, the actual texture of what you noticed, none of that is replicable by a model trained on 19th century novels. Punctuation isn't what makes writing human. Your particular way of seeing things is, a model can approximate the punctuation. It can approximate you. And for what it's worth, I'm keeping my M dashes, even if my colleague gives me that look. If this video gave you something to think about, hit the like button. It helps this channel more than you'd think. Subscribe if you want more breakdowns like this, and drop a comment. Do you notice M dashes in AI writing? Have you started avoiding them yourself? I read every single comment, and this one I'm especially curious about. See you in the next one.